we will shortly introduce ourselves and in general, but like I just wanted to make a short introduction about the organization that we're coming in the name of. We're coming in the name of an organization called Shoval. That's an acronym for Shetevot, for She'akol Bara Lechvodo, the blessing that we see in the beginning of the Chuppah. And it's an organization that works for LGBT advocacy and basically LGBT Hasbara, if you want to say that, like what? Basically bringing the stories of LGBT religious people and also creating conversations. We have the privilege to also have lots of allies like Rabbi Rafi that has been working with us for years, and basically facilitating such conversations that both LGBT men and women can tell their stories and have an open conversation with their communities that they come from, and also with Rebbeim that talk eye to eye, even if we don't see eye to eye, always. And for us, yes, in the end, the beginning is always hard, and every single place that we had Pesach Sheni was hard in the beginning, but like Baruch Hashem, I hope in a few years Bezat Hashem we will be able to host Pesach Sheni and say this was the beginning and grow much bigger. But really, Yishar Koach for the attempt and for the fight, and we really appreciate it. So basically what's going to happen, I'm going to introduce myself and tell shortly my story, and then Rabbi Rafi is going to give some remarks, and then we'll open up for questions. That's the model of the evening. So my name is Rafael Polisuk. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Jerusalem. I'm a rabbi and an educator at Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies. Was ordained about 2 years ago, and I'm also a gay religious man. And it's interesting to give this talk with Rabbi Rafi. We talked together for a while, and he saw me also along my path. Basically, for me, the story of me being who I am as a gay man, and also me being not only religious but rather also a Torah teacher, were very intertwined together. I basically found out about these two identities, my religious and rabbinical identity and my gay identity, almost at the same time in my life. I grew up in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, and in a family that you would define it usually as Masorti, traditional, but it wasn't exactly the definitions that we had in Brazil. Things were way more fluid. People were very committed, very religious in their own way, but not very halachic. And we made Aliyah when I was 9. And at that point in my life, I actually began seeing how different I was from the other kids. Because I knew I was different since a very young age, but because the small community, there was something okay on being different. And basically, I like to say that the moment I understood I was gay, that I wasn't like all the other boys, was also more or less the moment where I understood I was religious. Because as my parents moved here, they needed to put us in secular education because we weren't from. So like, if you're not Shomer Shabbos, you don't get accepted to the Mamlechti Dati school, at least not in our area, Gush Etzion, where we were. And I understood very quickly that I'm different from all the kids, that Kodesh Baruch Hu is a really big part of my life, that I want to learn more Torah, I want to be more involved. And more or less at the same time in my early adolescence, I was about 11, I also got the realization that I was gay. But at these early years, it was much easier because, I don't know, I have a lot to say about, Brazilians are really conservative and really close-minded sometimes, but they are actually very tmimim. And this tmimut that we had at home made me, I don't know, not panic. I didn't ask myself many questions about what it meant being gay, and I didn't ask many questions what it meant being religious, and I even more so did not ask any questions about what it meant being gay and religious. It was a fact. I assumed it would have some repercussions on my life, but I was 11, so I did not lose a lot of time with it. I didn't think about it too much. Moving forward, actually, when I was about 14, I began learning at a yeshiva tichonit at Midrashiyat Noam. I think that's also something. You also heard of Midrashiyat? No, only that. Okay. So I began learning at Midrashiyat Noam for Saba. And there I actually, mamash, fell in love with learning Torah. For the first time I had the Bet Midrash setting, and it was a love at first sight. The empty Bet Midrash of Midrashiyat Noam, because like, who learns Torah when you're in high school? In high school, it was like an endless opportunity for me. I really loved staying hours and hours in the Bet Midrash. And at that period, I began hearing many of the messages that you heard along these couple of weeks. For the first time, I began meeting, at the first time in a very severe way, a religious homophobia. At that time, there was a class once a week. It was called Chalamish, Chinuch L'Chayei Mishpacha. And at that time, there wasn't a curriculum for it even. We would like to joke that the rabbi would sit outside of the class and do En Dedina, and like pick one of 3 topics. One of them was Shmiras Negia, the other was masturbation, Shmiras Abris, and the new topic, the hot topic that he would love to talk about quite a lot was Netiyot Hafuchot, same-sex attraction. And basically, there, for the first time, I met very harsh statements, and most of them weren't religious in their nature. They were basically they were almost scientific claims. The rabbi, I remember him vividly saying that just like there are people that are attracted to animals or to dead bodies, so are people that are attracted to their same gender. They're perverted people. That they're sick. They're emotionally crippled, and it happens because their parents mistreated them when they were young kids, or because they were sexually harassed. That's the only reason that it can be.
Oh.
But very much unlike other sick people, other mentally unhealthy people, we do not need to have pity over gay and lesbian people, with netiyot hafukot, with same-sex attraction, because
it's a dog.
because people with same-sex attraction, they do it by choice, because there actually is a way to getting out of it. You can go to therapy, and there are therapies that will work, and everyone that wants can get out of it. So if they don't want to do it, and not only they don't want to do it, they do parades, they're so happy about it, it means only one thing. It can have only one meaning. Why do they do that? Because they hate Hashem. And if it sounds horrible to you, that's an actual tshuva that Moshe Feinstein wrote. It's in Igros Moshe. It's not something very outside of the box. And it's part of something that growing up gay in the religious world you might hear even today. But I don't know how to say that actually, I don't know, other friends of mine that were queer in the classroom, I assume that they took it very hard, but for me, it actually, in a weird way, made me feel actually calmer. Because with time...
No, right next to us, the bathroom, is the sink.
Because as time went by, I actually thought about myself, and I said, okay, I know my parents were actually quite great, and I know I didn't go through anything like this in childhood, and I mainly know that I actually really love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So maybe I'm simply not gay. Maybe it's simply a phase. Maybe simply I need to wait a bit until the end of high school. I'll simply not be gay. And actually that really helped me, because I didn't think too much about that. Things went by. Again, puberty is complex, and you have moments that you are very aware of what's happening to you. But every single moment that I had a question, that I had that I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm gay, what is happening here? I was saying to myself, no, it's only a question of time. Don't think about it too much. In Yiddish, you say Vaitar. Go forward, don't look backwards. Go forward, continue learning Torah, continue growing. And this was my motto along high school. But at that point, it was clear to me, it was not even something that I even thought about. It was mamash ingrained in my mind that for some reason, that again, it wasn't specifically halachic. It wasn't specifically for any reason, because the rabbi did not say anything. He simply said that gay people are bad. I understood, it was very deep in me, that being religious, that's something I love very much, and learning Torah and teaching Torah, and being gay do not work together. Ergo, I won't be gay. That was, it can't be. It's an either or, so I simply won't be gay in the end of the question. And moving fast forward, basically, at the end of Kita Yud Aleph, 11th grade, I finished high school and went to study at Yeshiva Merkaz Harav. I was 16. And there my growing love for Torah went completely out of hand. Yeshiva is a place to fall in love hard with Torah. And I fall in love, did I do, and simply feeling at home. I felt very much at home in the Beit Midrash. And as quick as I find myself in the Beit Midrash, I also begin very quickly also teaching. At the beginning, it was more helping the younger kids coming to check for the next year. I was to teach a chabura for the shvushim, that most of them were older than me, by at least a year and a half. And in the second year, I began giving a chabura, again, to the younger kids. Appointed by the Rosh Yeshiva. Me and a couple of friends at that point went out to Bnei Akiva in the summer camps and began what became the Beit Midrash group, Tzivtei Beit Midrash, that walk around in the summer camps of Bnei Akiva. We founded the Beit Midrash program of Bnei Akiva Israel, and I was mamash, this is the phase in the story that you're supposed to like do the end. They lived happily ever after, Rafael in the Torah, because like that's how it's supposed to work. I'm supposed to stay in yeshiva and get married and become an avrech and maybe become even a ram and teach at Bnei Akiva. Life was so perfect that I find myself 18 suddenly and I'm still gay. And what's gonna happen now? So at the beginning I began dating. Like I dated compulsively. I wanted to find someone that maybe a woman that with her would work. For me, it wasn't a question like if it even is possible. Like it can't be other way around. Like there needs to be someone in the world that with her I'll be able to do it. And I dated dozens of girls. I couldn't date more than one day because I couldn't lie to them. So like I was the Shadchantes of Yerushalayim became very angry because who is this weird guy that after one day says no? How do you know? And I say no, actually I know. And it's like I like to describe it that this phase was very much like going every single time back to yeshiva and looking at the mirror and like seeing a tattoo on my forehead that only I can see that becomes every single time more clear. Gay. Because if it's not her, and even though she's really nice, and even though she's really smart, and even though I could be her best friend, it's still not it. So maybe it can't be. Maybe I'll simply be like that and my life will be ruined. So at that point I actually decide to do something a bit more chirurgical, I would say. I decide to go to conversion therapy. I resorted to it was mamash less resort because I understood this would be something very radical, but I was given the assurance that basically my conversion therapist told me very openly, it's basically 70% of chances that you will become completely straight. That's what he told me as if it was like rocket science, and 30% that maybe you won't become straight, but no, you'll have all the kelim, you'll have all the tools that you need to live a life. Don't worry, everything will be okay. And very soon I entered into depression, and I became very, very suicidal. I was in conversion therapy for 5.5 months. And I think conversion therapy, if I can say anything good about it, it drove me to such an extreme. I was so close to very, very bad places that I simply understood that maybe I do not have another life. Maybe my life is literally going to end right now, like all that I love, but I need to go somewhere else. I need to do it differently because like this I'm simply going to die. And I decide to finish the conversion therapy, and I tell my friends that I'm going to the army because that's the way to disappear. I knew the army wouldn't recruit me because when they heard conversion therapy, they simply put the patrol on the table because they said, we can't deal with you, like you are in a complicated mental situation, you need to go and find yourself alive. Something I thank the army very deeply till today. But I was trying to figure out my way of life, and I had no answers. I never asked myself any questions when I was a young boy, because for me, it was a question of time. Sometime I'm simply going to stop being gay. So like, wait, what does it mean to be gay, actually? What does it mean to be gay and religious? Does it work with halacha? How? Will I find love? Will I be happy? What is happiness? Will I be able to teach Torah? Like, where in the world? In what sense? And at that period in my life, I was very depressed, but like understanding that I need to move on. And I did the only thing I knew how to do. That was learning Torah. So my last few months of yeshiva, I came down to the Sifriya, the library, one of the most impressive Torah-focused libraries in Israel, or in the world. And I'm sitting there and I'm basically learning every source that I can. I'm turning every book, entering into every source. I want to figure this out. And actually quite quickly I found myself my answers. I found myself the place where I can find myself completely okay with Allah and also completely okay with myself. But it also created some great sadness within me. Because at that moment, maybe if I lived a conflict, if there was no halachic solution, so maybe it would be okay. Maybe like, in Torah. But now I find an halachic solution. I find something that I'm okay with, but I'll be religious basically in a lone island. I'll never find a community. I'll never be a rabbi. I'll never teach Torah. Like I'll be religious, like I don't know, in an asylum or something like that. And at that period, I had a good friend that also came out of the closet. He was also a great Talmid Chacham, and like I was talking to him again and again, and I was saying, you're right. Like everything we're saying is right, but it doesn't work. Not in reality. It works in theory. And he would tell me, no, Rafael, you need to wait a bit. It will be okay. No, I'm trying to explain it. It won't work. Not in reality. Not in Olam Hazeh. Rafael, wait. Rafael, wait. And I told him, or it's not going to work. He told me, Rafael, someday you're going to come to me and you're going to tell me it was okay. And basically, after a few months, I decided that I had enough already power to leave yeshiva. I decided to come out of the closet a few months afterwards, and I found very quickly that my halachic cancers that I found were not only good for me. I found that many other LGBT youth were interested in it. I began writing about it and publishing also, and found myself helping many. Baruch Hashem, it was a great zchut. I joined Shoval. That's a place that I volunteer in and work when I have this zchut to be there for religious people from all walks of life, and also for the queer religious community. And I also found myself at Bet Midrash, where I learned and I got smicha from my Rav, and I also found the Bet Midrash where I teach today. And the way I like to finish my story is that basically at my smicha 2 years ago, or is waiting for me right below the podium and gives me my first shkoyach. Comes to me and says, "Didn't I tell you it would be okay?" So shkoyach, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my chance. Toda Rafael, that was very moving. So my name is Rafi Ostroff. I live in Alon Shmut in Gush Etzion. I'm head of the religious council of Gush Etzion and head of the Chevra Kadisha, and I do a few other things as well. I'm married to Lali. I have 6 children, 10 grandchildren, and I don't have anyone gay in my family that I know of anyway, currently. And how did I get to this issue? Why am I here? So, really, it's something like 20 years ago. I was teaching in a Mechina K'dam Tzva'it, and a student comes up to me. I was teaching issues related to Judaism and marriage education and things like that. And the student comes up to me, he wants to speak to me on the side, and he tells me that he thinks he's like that. That's what he says to me. And he wants to speak to me personally. So we go to the side, and I want to hear his story, and he tells me that he thinks that he's gay. He didn't say the word, he couldn't say the word, from the age of 10. And what's he supposed to do with himself? And he was very, very religious. Now this was the first time that I'd actually spoken to a gay person. I didn't even know he was really gay, but I didn't know what to tell him. Now, usually I have lots of answers for everything, and in this case I had no answers. Because I, like Rafael, I studied in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav. I studied in Yeshivat Har Etzion, that's where I got my smicha from. And no one ever spoke to us about same-sex attraction. No one, not one of the Ramim. All I knew about homosexuality was that it's a curse word used in the army between soldiers, and that's it. But what I did know was, now no one spoke to me, but that was in the air, that if you have a same-sex attraction, then it's because of, all these liberals that they are tired of being attracted to the opposite sex, so therefore they're looking for some kind of experiences. And also that it's very simple. You call a place called Datzat Nefesh, and you go there for some kind of treatment, and they press a few buttons, and they straighten you out, and everything's okay. But here, I was confronted with a completely different story. Firstly, this boy is 18 years old. He knows he's gay from 10. That means he didn't choose it. It was just placed upon him. Secondly, if he could change it, he would. He would have given anything in the world to change his orientation. That's what he told me. So it's probably not that simple. Just going for a few sessions, 2-3 sessions, and changing it. Now, I knew a friend of mine from my previous work that had come out of the closet. His name was Daniel, and I called Daniel. Now, we weren't very close, but we knew each other, we were friendly. And 2 years previously, it came out of the closet. He's one of the first gay religious, not the first, but among the first gay religious open people that I knew. It was something unheard of at the time, more or less. So I pick up phone and said, Danny, I need to speak to you. And then he knew exactly what I want to speak to him about. And I go and I sit with him for about 2 hours and he tells me his life story. And I asked him all the questions that I wanted to ask, and basically went on a whole mission of search and find and study and learn and speaking to gay people and understanding the story of something similar to Rafael. And at the end of my journey, I was very convinced that people, if they could change the orientation, they would, but probably impossible. And that God created them this way for a purpose which I do not understand, but probably there is a purpose. And that these are people that we need to accept them into our community. Because if my son would come to me and say, Abba, I'm gay, then I know for 100% certain that I would embrace him, I would love him, he'd be my son just like any other son. I would maybe mourn the fact that he cannot get married to a woman, he cannot raise a family in a regular way, he can raise a family in a different way, but he cannot raise a family in a regular way. I would mourn that, but that wouldn't change my love for him and my acceptance of him in any way. That was something that I felt strongly within myself. And I started looking around at how our religious educators and rabbis speak about this subject. And I couldn't understand the dissonance between how they speak about this so-called sin and how they speak about secular Jews. And when it comes to people that are Mechale Shabbos and eat nevelis and trefes and do a few other things, then they're all accepting and we love them and everything's okay and they're part of our brothers. But when it comes to gay people, we need to exclude them from our community. And there are something that's completely unacceptable to me, because not because of Western liberal values or anything like that, because of Torah. And something that I grew up very, very strongly on. I used to work for a few years for the chief rabbinate as head of the conversion authority of the chief rabbinate. And we know from the Midrash that 36 times, and some say 46 times, the Jews are commanded to relate compassionately to a ger, and a yatom, and a almana. And basically they represent the weak elements of a Jewish society. Why weak? Because they don't have these strong familial connections that back them. And so for I understood it literally as anybody that's today weak in society, relatively weak in society, you need to relate with them with compassion and acceptance. And that's how I view until today, definitely in the religious world, people with same-sex attraction. They, many times they feel left out, many times they don't feel that they have a place in community, and they don't feel that that they are equal or part of the religious general what's going on. And this is something that I think that needs to be rectified. I was never worried that they would influence our education or my children's education, for the simple reason is that I don't believe that anybody, definitely religious, if he has the ability to love someone from the opposite sex, he will. He or she will. And only in a case, because that's so much easier to blend in with the norm besides halachic considerations. And so, if someone has gone that path, and you hear from Rafael how much he wanted to blend in, how much he wanted to be part of the community, how much he wanted to be part of the Torah book, if he wasn't gay today, which is an identity that he cannot deny, then he will probably be a Ram in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, and it's difficult knowing that he has the ability to be a Ram in Yeshivat Merkaz Harav. He has the Torah scholarship of being so, but is excluded just because of his orientation. Now, I believe that if he was a Ram there, I don't think not even one of his students would be persuaded to be gay because of him. Just because Why be gay if you don't have to be gay? It seems to be so simple, like simple logic. We also know from research that children from gay families, from same-sex parents, do not have more attraction to the same sex than anybody else. So it's not something that you can educate people to. You can, obviously, they are more tolerant of people that have different identities or different, or they're not exactly fit or whatever. But it doesn't mean that anybody will be like that unless if they have a choice not to be like that. And then I studied much more, and I went into understanding how in the Christian world in America especially, how thousands and thousands of men have gone through harmful treatment by Christian ministers and different organizations that are trying to do the same thing that the conversion therapy that Rafael went through in Israel, just that everything that goes on in Israel 10 years after America. And when people started coming out of these organizations and leaders of these organizations started coming out of the closet and to say, you know what, I lied, I didn't tell the truth, I'm gay, none of my therapy has helped, not me and not others. This is something that we've seen also in Israel at the later, and this is the damage that they are doing to these people over the years is something that is very difficult to be forgiven. And maybe the worst thing is the rabbis in communities that they persuade the students, not in communities, in yeshivot, that they persuade the students to get married to a woman, and then they are destroying two lives at least, if not many more. The life of the man, the wife of the woman, which thinks she can contend with it, even if she knows. She thinks she can contend and live with it, but usually doesn't work. And the wife of their children. Maybe also the lives of the lives of their children. So this is something that I think we need to speak about. The fact that we've come here to Kochav Yaakov and that there are not 500 people or coming to listen to this talk, and that there was such a backlash here in the community with having this kind of talk over here, just shows us how afraid they are of something that they don't know, and that usually the biggest people that are vehemently against and speak out against LGBT people are people that have something to hide inside, and this just shows that I think that in a few years' time I believe that we'll be able to have a talk in Kochav Yaakov, and there will be many more people just knowing that it hasn't yet come to Kochav Yaakov, but it will happen to other places as well. I think the importance of this evening is just having it. Even though we knew, Adara, that we'd be coming to only a small audience, it was important for me to come in any case, just for the purpose of saying, yes, we're having it, and we're not allowing our voices to be silenced. So I think a big shkoyach to you for hosting this and going ahead with what you believe is true, and I hope that the rabbis of this community one day they're able to realize within themselves a very simple commandment, or it's even bigger than a regular commandment, Mahu Rachum, Afatah Rachum, Mahu Chanun, Afatah Chanun, that Torah will be a Torah of Chesed and not a Torah of Din. So that's how I hope that in a few years there won't need me to come from Gush Etzion, but the rabbis themselves will sit here in this kind of a meeting. So you're welcome to ask questions either to me or to Rafael, anything that you want. Please feel free to ask anything that comes to your mind. We're open to any kind of question.
So this is a topic I'm pretty knowledgeable about, but I would love to hear your thoughts and expand on it. After I posted about this event and I got so much backlash, people asked me, okay, I understand you want to be compassionate, but how does that combine with your view about halacha? So I told them, from what I understand, when it comes to men, there is one isur, what's it called? mishkav zachar. When it comes to women, it's one specific inyan and it's a dirabanan thing. One specific act and it's a dirabanan thing. And then I said, first of all, I know there's asexual gay people. Second of all, a gay person can decide to be celibate. Third of all, a gay person can decide to not be celibate but avoid that one specific act. And it's none of my business what people are doing in their bedroom. And the same way sleeping with someone when they're in need is just as usher. But people are not going around kicking secular people out of their community because of that. And so people said they really appreciated that, but aren't there more isurim, like when it comes to, for example, for men specifically, lolit karev and a few other things like that, and not just. And I said, from what I understand, that is just derabanan.
No, so it might be Doraita.
Well, no. So I looked at Rambam. I mean, from what I Rambam, I think there's a debate between Rambam and Mishnah Torah and was that, from what I understand, and I'd like to be corrected, that there's a debate whether erva just counts between men and women.
No, so it's a great question. It's a couple of questions, so I'll try to answer quickly. I'll say basically what you said is right, and I want to even say something a bit more, like a stronger point. There's something called an halacha hezkas kashrus. We see people. I see a firm person. I do not need to inquisit him if he keeps nida. I assume he does, not because keeping nida is simple. Actually, in some ways, keeping nida is more complicated than avoiding a specific sexual act between two men, but because I see a firm person, I do not assume he's a sinner. The situation with the religious community, that's what I call weaponization of halacha. I'm assuming that a person is a balavera, even though I have no reason to assume. I see a person that every single thing that he does screams Yerusha Shaman, because like even if he's not the firmest person in the world, the fact he wants to be religious even though he's gay, that in itself is such an ordeal that like I have no reason actually to assume that he's doing an isur, but still we weaponize halacha against these people.
I want to comment on that. Till about 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a religious gay person. When I said there was no such thing, it wasn't that there wasn't actually such a thing, but usually people that identified as gay took off their kippah, went to live in Tel Aviv and stopped being religious. Or they remained religious, but they hid their gayness in the gay affiliation very, very deep into a cupboard, or not being faithful to getting married, not being faithful to the wives, or destroying their marriage, but it never went away, but hiding it very, very deep. Something changed about 20 years ago, together with the world, that people came out and said, you know what, I have two identities, and I cannot forego any of them. I'm religious, I believe in God, I love mitzvot, I love learning Torah. And at the same time, this is also part of my identity. My sexual attraction is also part of my identity, and I cannot forego any of them. How do I reconcile them? So Rafael spoke about maybe a bit his reconciliation. Everybody reconciles it a bit differently. Some people, he spoke about nidas. Not everybody keeps all the isurim of nida in the same way among religious people, and the same thing with people with same-sex attraction. Many years ago, a Gadol Torah in America by the name of Rabbi Aaron Feldman wrote a very important letter. And in this letter, he writes a letter to a gay Baal Tshuva, and he says that the inclination or the attraction is not an issur in Torah. It's not an issur to be attracted to the same sex. The issur is what you mentioned, a specific sexual act. And so he there recommends to that gay person not to get married and to work in things that a married person, it's more difficult for him to work in. For instance, to do Keiruf. Every Shabbat you can go to a different community because you don't have a family, and you can do Keiruf. That's what he's offering to this person. I don't know, by some Siyata de Shemaya, some chance, but there's no such thing as a chance. The same week that I read that letter, I was at a wedding in Jerusalem of one of my relatives, and there on the main table is sitting Rabbi Aaron Feldman. So I go to him and I said, I read your letter, Shkoyach, and so on. He said, yes, thank you very much. And I said, listen, what you're offering to this person is not to get married. Now, in Judaism, we don't believe in Christian Nazir.
Celibacy.
No, celibacy, but Christian Nazir. Like Christian religious Catholics that never get married. We don't believe in that. Our biggest Kohen Gadol, if he wants to work in Yom Kippur in the Beis Mikdash, he has to be married. And they even put a spare wife for him in case his wife dies just on the Erev Yom Kippur. So that he'll be married when he needs to go to the Kodesh Kodashim. We don't believe in that, in celibacy, in people not getting married for their lives. So how are you recommending this to a person? And he didn't have a good answer. He said, no, he didn't have an answer. That's the truth. And so that does not mean that two men actually have to commit a sexual act that is also according to Torah. There are many other ways that people can be intimate together, they can love each other together, and not be over on the Isur Torah.
So just maybe answer also your question about there is actually a machloket in the Rishonim and the Achronim if is Isur Kirva be'erva, lo tikrevu lo terva, how it works exactly. Even number one, there is the shito that it's the Rabbanon, but the Rabbanon is not nothing. But we have actually a tshuva from none other of Yosef Shalom Eliashiv, the greatest posek of the Haredi world, of the past generation, of our generation basically. I still have the zchut to see him. Yosef Shalom Eliashiv in a tshuva at Kovetz Shivot Gimel Siman Reish Pei Dalet. I can send anyone who wants to see. He says that Leshitas Harambam. He proves in the Rambam that bezachor en kirva be'erva, that there is no prohibition around sexually related activity that is not coitus precise, like precisely penetrative sex between two men. He proves it mamash from a Rambam Meforash. I can send the Zorji to whoever wants. And basically, I think the question is not can you matir. I think anyone who knows halacha a bit, who learned any sugya, there's no black and white in halacha. There are very few things in halacha that are very black and white. The question is, and I think that this is a deep question that both gay religious people ask themselves, because a lot of gay religious people also feel a deep conflict, but also the religious world needs to ask is, do we want to matir? Do we think there is a value here that I say, nachon, it might have a cost, a societal cost, a faithnish, but I think giving religious people that were happen to be born LGBT a path in Yiras Shamayim, if I see this as a value, so of course I'll find a way. And something very interesting that I actually had a few very candid conversations with rabbis that are mamash on the opposite side of the spectrum. One of the best conversations I actually had was with a rabbi that actually admitted to me that he sees a value in not matir. Meaning, he said to me, okay, you're right, there are many sources to say like that, but I don't want to. And in a sense, I respect that opinion a bit more than a lot of what happens in the religious world today. It's very famous. The Rav Aviner in his shoot, he liked very much to say there is no such halachic opinion in the issues that he doesn't agree about. And there is no such halachic opinion that women can go to the army. There is no such halachic opinion, and there are halachic opinions. The question is, do we want to pass it like them? It's a whole different question. And I actually, again, as a rabbi, in a sense, I feel very okay with saying yes, my values here. My values that both, some of them come from Torah, but also some of them come from my general morality, lead me towards, I don't know, thinking that agunot need a solution. Lead me to think that I want to find a solution, even if bedochak. And that's something also that I want to speak about here. Lots of the people that are not here in the room today would like to say, yeah, you can solve it, but it's not like a tchila. It's not the way. Rabbi Rafael Bigman, the Rosh of Malkibah, and also one of the great poskim of our generation, like really a dayan with shoulders that few have. He once told me something that actually I live with a lot. That there is no lekatchila v'b'diavad in nefashos. Like this idea that like okay, I'll have an aguna come to my beit and I'll say no, actually I'm not telling you b'diavad. If you find an heter and you stand behind it, it's a mutar, and it's not only mutar, it's a katchila because there is a value of life, a deep value of life. I can't say yes. I can't say basically Judaism is also moral. Like the question is not only can I find a heter for Esau. When I look at my Torah, is my Torah Chanim, a Torah that causes life, that makes people, number one, keeps people Shomer Mitzvahs, and also keep them alive as they're shown in mitzvah, alive and happy and having full lives, or not? Or do I create a Torah shehisama mavet, kipshuto, a Torah that literally kills and generates death? I don't know how to say, but the Torah that we're seeing a lot in some sides of religious Zionism in this aspect is a Torah shehisama mavet, a Torah that calls people to get married with the opposite sex and destroy their families. It's literally a Torah that is creating death. Like when these neshamot of these kids that their lives, their parents were ruined, will come to Shemayim and they'll ask like, what? This is Elbonah Shel Torah. They will say no, they got married because that's the Torah's way. That's not the Torah's way. Torah Chaim. So there are many other, like, we can talk about every single issue related question here. The question, for example, about lesbian women, it's very, very interesting. There is actually a great tshuva that came out a year and a half ago by Rabbi Rafi Fox, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Maharat at NYC. That he wrote an extensive article about the question of Nashim HaMesalalot Zo B'Zo. And one of the most beautiful things about this tshuva, regardless of the answer he gives in the end, is also his genius and mamash meduyak, is that he goes through the whole halachic scope and goes through all the poskim, Rishonim and Achronim. In something that when I finished reading it, I called a chavruta of mine and I told him, actually this tshuva makes me sad. Because that's not a conversation that we're having usually. Usually people that are people of Torah, even though that's a conversation they have in every single issue, in this issue they become as narrow-minded as I don't know what. Every question has even if you disagree in the end, let's talk. Let's be real. Let's see the Mekoros. Let's open the Tshuva revelation. Let's see the Aruch LaNer here or the Beis Shmuel there. It's an halachic question, like all halachic questions. And I think that there is an attempt here, a deep attempt to avoid halacha. In a sense, I think halacha is not part of the problem; it's part of the solution. Halacha is I deeply believe in it. That halacha is the solution here. I think that most people simply do not want to talk halacha because halacha might intervene in their ideologies. Because halacha maybe sometimes is less ideological. Halacha is more on the ground. And if there's an invitation from this evening, is let's learn halacha. Let's talk halacha.
The only reason I mentioned, by the way, Derabanan
of course,
is because when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh and Ein Pikuach Nefesh, that would be overriding the Derabanan.
But it's not actually Pikuach Nefesh in the strictest sense of it. But you're totally right.
That's why I meant that.
There's actually a great article about I think it's Rusberger who wrote about the concept of whether the overrides about Derabanan. He proves it from like basically every single part of the Shas.
Yeah, there are many sources. There are many sources.
No, many sources, and like he talked about this in questions of like today we have some Derabanan. He talked mainly about questions of women in society. They're like some Isurim Derabanan seem to like conflict with women's role in society, but there's also a deep question of Kod HaBriot, the question of the dignity of a human being. And I think, in a sense, what is very much lacking in our halachic conversation today, in the public halachic conversation, is that almost we treat halacha as amoral. It's almost like Hashem gave a lot of rules, and like, showing. It's almost like the rabbi of the shul here can say, it's not that I don't like gay people, but what can I do if Hashem hates them? What can I do if Hashem hates them? And I want to, and something that this is mamash antithetical to Chazal, to the way Chazal see Torah. That the fact that Chazal inherited to us not only halachot, they inherited to us these meta values for the bliot and things like that. Yes, they're supposed to tell us the mechanism through which Torah is supposed to work is a mechanism that sees humans, that sees bigger values than only the nitty gritty. Any other questions?
Yeah. How do transgender people fit into this whole thing?
Shalom. So I'd care to open with a disclaimer. Neither me or Rafi, as much as I know, are transgender people, and I think that that's something missing in the conversation. When you talk with and not talk about,
I figured that was a little too complicated to even bring up in Kochav Yaakov.
No, but like I think that that's a conversation to be opened. I think it's something that I learned, and I want to say here, both from an halachic perspective and from a human perspective. Lemad leshoncha lomar ini yodea. There is things that I do not understand. I try my best to listen to trans people and to learn halacha in a way that might find solutions, but there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to learn in so many issues, and I think part of the problem is that because society is so polarized, things jump to conclusions. Everything becomes questions about...
Becomes a political question.
Become political questions, and in the end, if there's something I'm sure of behind 100% is that trans questions in many, and if not most cases, are pikuach nefesh gamur. The sport is real, and there is no question that they have an heter to do changes. Beyond that, there are multiple difficult questions, because basically I would say that the trans issue opens up a whole different can of worms, and I'm saying it in the best possible way, of gender in Judaism. Because in a sense,
not only in Judaism.
gender in general, but I'm saying in the Jewish world.
It's a much bigger challenge to the world, not
Nachon.
only to Judaism. In the world, it's a new thing, it's a new phenomenon. The world itself does not know exactly how to relate to this issue. I think it's something that needs more time in the world, in Judaism, to be able to say something more coherent other than what Rafael said, we don't know. And I think that in the world itself, the issue is not solved, even in very liberal communities and societies, and it's something that needs to be discussed with an ongoing discussion without exclamation marks, not yet.
I think also the main point here, in a sense, the trans question is the simplest halachically and also the most complicated halachically. Because
I don't think it's simple. I think it's
No.
a very no.
no, I'm saying
I
the
agree
issue,
with that.
the simple isurim that are on the ground.
I think I don't think it's simple, and I think it's a much bigger challenge, both halachically, both Judaism-wise, but in general in society.
But that's what I mean. That's what I meant to say. That in a sense, it's the simplest. If you want to go on the simplistic level, it's the simplest. But in the big level, on the meta questions that it raises, it's much bigger. For example, one might ask, what is the difference in general between men and women? Like Judaism, at least as it is today, is so much organized around differences between genders. And okay, we want to say people can change from one gender to another, or identify as different genders. But now it maybe raises a deeper question of, in general, what is the meaning of distinctions between genders? And I think that the halachic conversation there is still very much, not even before transgenders, the questions of women in halachic society are open and are still very much still maturing. Today there was a first meeting of women, the first meeting of all the halacha programs that give smicha to women in halachic capacities. It's an ongoing process of understanding gender within Judaism, and I think transgender people, they enter within that in a sense and complicate that and are complicated by that also. But something I want to say, just to maybe put it clearly, in the reason why I said it's the simplest in the halachic level is that when you have real pikuach nefesh, when you have this situation.
I don't agree. You can say you can.
No, I want to hear your
I
comments.
still don't agree.
Okay.
I don't think it's simple. I think it's a very complicated halachic issue, but and I don't think it's simple in any way.
It's great.
I've got a question. I don't remember your names.
It's easy, they're the same
Rafi
name.
and Rafi.
Huh?
They're both
Rafi
Rafael.
and
Rafael and Rafael.
Oh, that doesn't help to specify who's who.
Rafael and Rafael.
Rafael, what made you want to get into the activism for this? As in, there's a lot of people that might be like, okay, I support it, but why? But not necessarily want to actually try and change something about society, try and do something about it. What made you specifically want to do something about it?
I'm not afraid.
Hmm?
I'm not afraid.
Good answer.
Most rabbis that even though they support quietly, they're afraid. Not only in this issue, many issues. And I'm not afraid. I think that the Torah is emes, and if you believe that that's what the met is, then you just go and need to speak it out. I don't do it, certain things I don't do publicly. I've got other considerations, I've got professional considerations, and many things. But I'm just not afraid.
I was thinking about how you had to deal with being a teenager in these very traditional environments, and when I'm sure it wasn't just from the Torah sources that you were recognizing that it wasn't fitting also socially.
Mm-hmm.
Like how did you deal with the yeshiva setting as a teenager? If that's too personal.
No, it's a great question. I actually want to say that that I have another identity besides being gay, besides being gay. I'm yeshivish. No, and it fit me really well. I want to say the Americas, in a sense, and the Americas Rebbeim will probably not like what I'm about to say, but I actually think the Americas was actually a very queer, relative sense, because it wasn't very masculine.
It's very nerdy.
It's very nerdy. Everyone thinks that I speak with my hands because I'm gay. No, I actually speak with my hands because I'm yeshivish. No, and it was actually my deepest moments of freedom. When I was in high school, it was very hard because high school was very manly, very this. Yeshiva was a place. The joke was that we were genderless in yeshiva, and it was so pure in a deep sense. That's in a sense, if I have pain and I have angst, and I have something against my rabbis, is that they ruined that for me. Because at the moment that they understood I was gay, then the doors were closed. But for me, I never felt any problem in yeshiva. And weirdly enough, Americas and we were so right wing that we didn't even talk about gay people. It wasn't even discussed negatively. I can count on 5 fingers the times that it was raised up in any setting on my 4.5 years in yeshiva, okay?
Wow.
And it wasn't there, and it was so protected. And in a sense, I want to say something that I sometimes mamash have pity on people growing up in other corners of religious. I mean, even people that are more liberal, they are all the time bombarded with that. It's a talk. They talk about it all the time, and you can't grow up like this. I, most of the time, did not think about being gay. I already had my mishigas within my head. The rest of the time, I didn't meet my rabbis to confuse me more. And even it doesn't matter if you learn in Chardali yeshiva or in a very liberal yeshiva, they're talking about it compulsively. And in a sense, I tell Rabbeim all the time, let these kids grow. Okay, their lives will be hard enough when they leave yeshiva. Let yeshiva be a safe haven. Yeah. And I actually really believe, I believe yeshivot can be very good spaces for queer people. Okay, you will need to figure out how to do yichud things and how to make everyone feel comfortable. But in the essence, these nerdy spaces are a haven for queer nerds, just like I was.
When you said yichud, does that mean there's actually an Isra of yichud with gay men?
So there are opinions that might be a nisu yichud. Rav Stav actually wrote a mama about it. I completely disagree. But I want to say, besides a general halachic question of yichud, making people feel comfortable is a question. And so for me, I would not like to be in a situation that inclusion of gay people means taking people and making them feel uncomfortable in a sense that I don't if a person does not want to sleep with a gay man in the room, that's his choice. I don't know, and it's a complicated thing to navigate. In a sense, I actually had a few conversations with Rosh Yeshiva. The question, for example, of teaching at yeshiva is something that I think a lot of places in the Zionist religious world not only understand that they should have gay rabbis, but they need, because they have gay students. And not only won't the gay rabbi influence the other students, the gay students need a role model. They need someone to look to and say, I can be like that. But many times, the thing is that it simply is weird. It's simply too much for them. And I think that, as an ongoing conversation, that's part of the thing. As Rabbi Rafi said, a few decades ago, there were no gay religious people, and with time it becomes more normalized. And with time, also, we'll begin thinking about these questions: how to have a, again, separated genderly space that has within it people that are attracted to the same gender. It's a question to ask, and there are many answers to be given here. But actually, we're only at the tip of the iceberg. Mamash on the tip of the iceberg.
I have a.
Sorry.
No, I'm interested because my kids, most of my kids are past their teenage stage, but I have one kid that you have 2 things. You have the explicit homophobia that they're experiencing, either just definitely in this issue it's a curse to say homo. It's not a description. It's a curse. And that's part of just the general way in which they're growing up. But on the other hand, from the other side, there's a lot of experimentation with 14, 15-year-old girls. My daughter is just shocked when she was in the dormitory school and there were girls that were experimenting. And I'm wondering if that had anything to do with her really very homophobic comments. I don't want to be around this. I don't want to be around all this stuff. I don't want to be around it. And to some extent I'm thinking she's in this part of her life but she's trying to figure out who she is. And there's a lack of boundaries. And we do in chinuch really talk about boundaries and MySpace and
in your space, yeah.
It's not enough education. It's kind of a.
And how do you reconcile these ideas of attraction and boundaries as these kids are growing up, and then, it just clearly, the Hanhala are trying to work this stuff through, but like we're at the very beginning. So
It's proven that the more the education is single sex, it promotes homosexuality. It promotes not necessarily people being like that, but experiencing.
Yeah.
experimentation.
Yeah, we had actually a good research that came out not a while ago by Maron Kaplan. She did a doctorate on that, on the sexual experimentation amongst separate societies is bigger, and I think that in a sense that might be one of the kernels of especially Chordali homophobia, because they are seeing it a lot, and but it also creates confusion. I think experimentation is complicated, but in a sense it's something that it's almost unavoidable. It was there even before we know that, like, people experiment because that's how they grow up, and we would like maybe as parents and as educators to put boundaries, but in a sense, yes, that's how life works.
Right.
And but I want to say that in a sense there is the problem that this creates is that in a society that is hyper scrupulous around its own homophobia, people grow to think about themselves as gay, because if they experimented with a man, that means they're gay, or even if they're bisexual, like they become very it becomes an obsession. And like I actually had a few talks with Rebbeim that, like, in a sense, okay, you can't stop experimentation, so like you're trying to cause them trauma by making them like very afraid of the fact that they be like, it doesn't work. You're trying to solve one bad thing with a worse one, and I don't think there is a solution. Actually, in a sense, maybe the solution actually lies somewhere on a more mixed society, if at all. And we're getting there in many levels, even in the more firm parts of the world. But like, it doesn't solve it, because there's also like heterosexual experimentation, and that's not.
That's right. It's a question of boundaries in general, and communication and consent.
Yeah, they do.
And adequate sex education.
Exactly. And so
Yes.
people need simple sex education. It's proven in countries that they have adequate, positive sexual education. Children experiment with much less than when they don't. There's no education or negative education.
Any other last question?
Yeah. Did any rabbis give you trouble with getting smicha?
Did any not? It was very complicated getting smicha. But I want to say that, in a sense, it wasn't the question for me so much. Like for me, I don't know, Rabbi Rafi probably has the same experience. Like where we grew up, smicha was less of the thing. The thing was, you were a rabbi if you're a Torah teacher, that's what you do. You get smicha if you want to be, I don't know, more a community rabbi or something like that. And I knew, in a sense, I knew that I needed smicha not for myself. I felt that, in a sense, gay people needed, and they still need, more and more people that teach halacha that are recognized. So like I fought for smicha not for my, like, in a sense, like I like to say that like getting smicha gave me a few gray hairs, like on the way to smicha. Areini kevin shivim shana. It wasn't for my benefit. I have a lot of gray hairs. You're not seeing there below my kippah. And probably shortened my life in a few years. With my heart disease that I probably developed because of it. But like I want to say that, in a sense, it's a fight that, as my rabbi, Reb Danny Landis, told me before my smicha, he told me something that I cherish very deeply, and it's a confession almost. Like he said, you know, when I'll be in my Meva Esri, I know that Hashem is going to ask me, why did I not begin giving smicha to gay men earlier? Because I know there are many questions in the world that I'm not able to answer, and I did not provide for the educators for the generation to come that will solve it. So I want to thank you that you are mechaper for me. You're doing the things that I can't do.
Where did you get smicha from?
I get smicha from, not from the Rabbanut, if that wasn't
I
obvious.
was gonna say, like, as far as I know, even YCT doesn't give smicha to openly gay guys.
So YCT, it's a whole spiel. I actually am very close to the Anala there, and they're on an interesting path, and Baruch Hashem, they're going to give smicha to an openly gay man in literally a few days, their first gay man, and they're about to enroll 2 talmidim of mine into their smicha track. I got smicha from Rabbi Danny Landis at Yashur, that's basically an independent smicha initiative. Danny was basically the first one actually to even give smicha to Orthodox women, like about 25 years ago. And Rav Danny was always a leader of Torah morality, and like he was lighting the way, just like he began with Torah with women in the sense. And Baruch Hashem, today we have many places that teach halacha to women. And Baruch Hashem, he gave smicha to the two first open gay Orthodox rabbis, me and Rav Daniel Atwood of the States. And Baruch Hashem, today we have many more coming, and many also gay women that are coming. And I think again, it's not the like the title gay rabbi is not a title that I hold with like I don't know, like it's a if you look at Wikipedia, that's my title there. But in a sense, I think that again, it's not about me. It's about the fact that we need Torah voices from the queer world. We need queer people to write Torah for queer people. We need people to answer questions that people don't look at in a sense. And Baruch Hashem, that's a big part of my life, simply writing truths and thinking about halacha in places where halacha wasn't naturally, and now thinking about how to bring halacha, how to bring Dvar Hashem's halacha to these places.
So I am a little embarrassed to admit how ignorant I am about the actual halachic sources, considering the very large number of queer people I count among my loved ones, that I just don't have the background in like the halachic questions, answers, sources, and while I could sit here and bombard you with them right now, I think it would be more productive to ask if you have any sources, any publications or anything that you could recommend.
So number one, Rabbi Rafi actually had very beautiful publications and very important publications that he published along the years, both in Makor Rishon.
Yes, but not
halachically specific.
not halachic with regard to gender queer.
No, not gender queer, but he's saying queer is a general
Queer
term.
in general.
Queer in general.
But like,
Queer is a
and
term.
gender queer would also be very helpful.
No,
But
the term here is
but,
about LGBT. Queer is a term. It's like a general term for all.
לא, אבל כן, הבנתי, אבל...
היא שואלת לגבי כאילו מקומות, איפה להתחיל ללמוד על הנושא? זה בכללי, הנושא להט"ב בהלכה.
אין לי מה...
נכון, אבל הרב כתב דברים מחשבתיים חשובים.
Not just about trans people. She
yeah,
means about gay
just in
people.
general, gay people, like anyone in the because I encounter a lot of this sort of thing where I have to talk to people who are not queer friendly, and as a religious person who has a lot of queer religious friends and non-religious, queer non-religious friends and loved ones, I want to be able to present them with something that they can chew on or think about or
It's complicated. I have an article that was published in the Makor Rishon newspaper.
What's it called?
I have an article
In
in
Makor
Makor Rishon which expounds on my view and how we're supposed to relate to them in community. But it's not a source sheet that you can go through. I have a source sheet.
Like the actual nitty gritty, like what Dara was saying, like what these
So I
are.
have a source sheet, but
what,
not that
you know.
explicit to go to every one of those details.
Actually, so you're more than welcome to search me on Facebook. I actually
Rafael, I
talk
think
quite a lot about that. Like I have
a very good suggestion.
and
Have you published?
yeah, I published a lot. And like if you search halacha, the word halacha in my feed, you'll probably find lots of
You
posts.
post most on Facebook or is it?
Yes, on my Facebook I have I actually had a series of posts under the title of Veha Ereinenu that like is an expose on halacha and LGBT in general, like it's an introduction for halacha and LGBT. I really recommend, as if I did not write it myself, but it was really good editing. I didn't edit, that's why it's so good. But basically, I really recommend simply being in tune. There are a few rabbis that are writing about these issues. Like I think about Rabbi Rafael from New York, who writes very eloquently and in English.
Rabbi Sachar Katz in New York.
Yes, and he actually wrote two very important shuvot, one about gay people and one about trans people. His shuvah about trans people, for example, is one of the more thorough things I ever saw written about trans people. Like he brings literally every makor from the and like people like also contemporary and trying to like decipher their tiredness and like in breadth and depth. I would also follow Rabbi Yoni Rosenzweig
Of course I do.
Yeah. And that's it basically.
Okay.
There are many more, but that's on a nutshell. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for making
Thank you
it
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. כל הכבוד, כל הכבוד פלסטין.